Jake Morrison stood at the window of the human diplomatic ship Endeavour, watching the massive crystal structure grow larger as they approached. The Galactic Council chambers floated in the darkness of space like a giant jewel, its surface glowing with soft blue light. After 30 years of diplomatic service, Jake had seen many impressive sights, but this one still took his breath away. "Ambassador, we'll be docking in 15 minutes, Captain Lucy Park announced from behind him. Jake nodded and straightened his black suit jacket. It was a simple outfit by Earth standards, nothing fancy or expensive. Just a plain black suit, white shirt, and dark tie. But among the aliens of the Galactic Council, it would stand out like a sore thumb. Jake had been Earth's top diplomat for the past decade. He was 52 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too much politics. Today, those eyes were calm and steady, even though he knew this meeting would not go well. The Council had summoned humanity to answer for what they called aggressive expansion into 3-star systems near Earth's territory. The docking bay was enormous, designed to hold ships from dozens of different worlds. As Jake walked down the ramp from the Endeavour, he could see other diplomatic vessels. The Zephyrian ship looked like a blue crystal mountain. The Kithara vessel resembled a giant insect with metal wings. The ethereal transport was just a glowing ball of energy contained in a clear sphere. 2 council guards met Jake at the entrance. They were tall, thin beings with 4 arms and skin that changed colors like a rainbow. They said nothing, just gestured for him to follow. Jake walked behind them through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of the same crystal as the outside, and they hummed with energy that made his teeth ache. The council chamber was a massive circular room with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. 12 platforms hung in the air, each one holding representatives from different alien species. In the center of the room was a small platform where Jake was supposed to stand. It was lower than all the others, making him look up at the council. Members like a child being scolded. Chancellor Vexstar of the Zephyrians sat on the highest platform. He was 8 feet tall with blue skin and 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on his face. His robes were made of what looked like liquid silver, and they moved like water around his body. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "So the humans have finally arrived," Vexstar said, his 3 eyes focused on Jake. "We were beginning to think you had run away in fear." The other council members made sounds that Jake recognized as laughter. The Kithara clicked their mandibles together in a rhythm that sounded like machine gun fire. The ethereals made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The other species had their own ways of showing amusement, but they were all laughing at him. Jake stepped onto the central platform and looked around the chamber. He had studied these species for years, knew their customs and their weaknesses. But he showed no emotion on his face, just the same calm expression he always wore. "Honorable council members," Jake began, his voice clear and steady. "I am Ambassador Jake Morrison, representing the United Earth Government. I've come to discuss the concerns you have raised about human expansion into the Kepler, Ross, and Vega systems." "Discuss?" Vexstar's middle eye narrowed. "You are here to receive judgment, not to discuss anything. Humanity has violated the expansion protocols by claiming 3 systems without council approval." Jake pulled out a tablet computer and consulted his notes. "According to our surveys, all 3 systems were uninhabited. We followed the standard protocols for claiming empty systems. Our colonies were established according to the guidelines set by the council itself." The Kithara representative, an insect-like being called Hive Speaker Zix, made a chittering sound. "The guidelines apply to civilized species, not to primitive mammals who have barely learned to leave their homeworld." More laughter filled the chamber. Jake waited for it to die down before speaking again. "Earth has been a member of the galactic community for 43 years. We have followed all laws and regulations during that time." "Membership does not mean equality," said the ethereal representative, its voice like a whisper that somehow filled the room. "Some species are born to lead, others to follow. Humans are clearly followers." Vexstar stood up from his platform, his silver robes flowing around him like liquid metal. Look at you, human. You stand before the greatest civilizations in the galaxy wearing the primitive coverings of your species. Do you think that simple black cloth makes you our equal? Jake looked down at his suit, then back up at the Chancellor. I dress according to human custom, just as you dress according to yours. Human custom, Vexstar repeated, his voice full of contempt. The customs of hairless apes who only learned to use fire a few thousand years ago. You should be grateful that the Council allows your species to exist at all. The chamber erupted in laughter again. Jake could hear the different species making their own versions of mocking sounds. The Zephyrians made a sound like breaking glass. The Cathara clicked their mandibles in what sounded like mechanical laughter. Even the usually quiet ethereals made sounds like wind through a graveyard. The Council has made its decision, Vexstar announced when the laughter died down. Humanity will abandon the 3 systems within 30 standard days. All future human expansion will be subject to Council approval. Human ships will be limited to designated trade routes. Any violation of these terms will result in corrective action. Jake listened to the terms without changing his expression. Inside, he felt a cold anger building, but he kept it hidden. He had expected this outcome. Earth's intelligence services had warned him that the Council saw humanity as a threat that needed to be controlled. I will relay your message to Earth, Jake said simply. Your message? Vexstar's 3 eyes all focused on Jake. These are not requests, human. These are orders. The Council has spoken. Jake nodded once. I understand. Is there anything else? The Chancellor seemed surprised by Jake's calm response. He had expected anger, fear, or pleading. Instead, the human just stood there in his simple black suit, looking as calm as if they had been discussing the weather. You may go, Vexstar said finally. Remember, 30 days. If human ships are still in those systems after that time, the Council will take action. Jake bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that cost him nothing. Thank you for your time, Honorable Council members. As Jake walked out of the chamber, he could hear the Council members talking among themselves. They were pleased with how easily they had handled the human problem. The primitive species had been put in their place without any real resistance, but as Jake walked back to the Endeavor, his mind was already working on the next phase of the plan. The Council had made a mistake today. They had shown their true feelings about humanity. And they had given Earth all the justification it needed for what was coming next. The simple black suit that had been the subject of so much mockery contained. Sensors that had recorded every word, every gesture, every detail of the Council's arrogance. That information was already being transmitted back to Earth, where people much more dangerous than a diplomat in a suit were waiting to hear how humanity had been treated. Jake Morrison climbed aboard the Endeavor and gave the order to return. To Earth, behind him, the Council chambers continued to glow in the darkness of space, its occupants completely unaware that they had just made the worst mistake in their civilization's history. The Endeavor docked at Luna Station 3 days after leaving the Council chambers. Jake Morrison gathered his files and walked through the station's corridors toward the secure transport that would take him to Earth. The moon base was busy with activity, but Jake noticed things that most people would miss. There were more military personnel than usual. Ships that looked like cargo haulers but moved too quickly. Workers loading containers that seemed too heavy for their size. Jake's transport landed at Andrews Spaceport in Washington, D.C. just as the sun was setting. A black car waited for him on the landing pad, its driver a serious-looking woman in a dark suit. She said nothing during the drive to the White House, but Jake could see her eyes checking the mirrors more often than necessary. The Oval Office was crowded when Jake arrived. President Lisa Carter sat behind her desk, her face showing the strain of the past few weeks. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Around the room sat the most powerful people in the human government. Defense. Secretary Carl Watson stood near the window, his massive frame blocking some of the evening light. Director of Human Intelligence Ben Rodriguez sat in a chair by the fireplace, a tablet computer in his hands. General Patricia Hayes, the head of Earth's military forces, studied a holographic display that showed star charts. Admiral Kevin Brooks, commander of the human fleet, paced back and forth like a caged animal. "Jake," President Carter said as he entered the room. "How bad was it?" Jake set his briefcase on the coffee table and opened it. "Exactly as we expected, Madam President. The Council sees humanity as a threat that needs to be controlled. They've given us 30 days to abandon the 3 systems and submit to their oversight for all future expansion." General Hayes looked up from her display. "And if we refuse?" "They'll take what they called corrective action," Jake replied. Chancellor Vextar made it clear that they consider humans to be primitive animals who should be grateful for their protection. Admiral Brooks stopped pacing and turned to face Jake. "Did they buy your performance?" Jake smiled for the first time since returning to Earth. "Completely. They think I'm just a frightened diplomat who got put in his place. They have no idea what I really learned while I was there." Then Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. "What did you find out?" Jake pulled out a small device that looked like a pen. "This recorded everything?" "Every conversation, every security measure, every detail of their technology. The Council's arrogance made them careless. They let me see things they never should have shown to an enemy." President Carter stood up and walked to the window. "Enemy, is that what we are now?" "The Council made that choice when they decided to treat humanity like children," Jake said. "They could have negotiated. They could have found a compromise. Instead, they chose to humiliate us and make demands." Defense Secretary Watson moved away from the window. "What's our situation, Ben?" Rodriguez touched his tablet and the holographic display changed to show military intelligence. "The Council's member species have been at peace for over 200 years. Their military technology hasn't advanced much in that time. They're used to dealing with threats through diplomacy and economic pressure, not actual warfare. Their fleets are impressive but outdated," Admiral Brooks added. "Big ships with lots of firepower, but they're slow and predictable. They fight like they're putting on a show rather than trying to win a war." General Hayes pointed to the star chart. "More importantly, they're spread thin. 12 species controlling. Thousands of worlds means their forces are scattered. They can't concentrate their power quickly." President Carter turned back to the room. "And our advantages?" Jake answered first. "They underestimate us completely. To them, we're a young species that just learned to travel between stars. They have no idea how much we've learned from studying their technology." "We've been preparing for this since first contact," Rodriguez said. "Every trade mission, every diplomatic meeting, every cultural exchange has been gathering intelligence. We know their weaknesses." Admiral Brooks pulled up another display. "Our ships are smaller and faster than theirs. We use different tactics, different weapons. They're expecting a traditional space battle with big fleets facing each other. That's not how humans fight," General Hayes nodded. "Human military doctrine is based on speed, surprise, and hitting where the enemy doesn't expect. We've been wargaming scenarios against every Council species for decades." President Carter sat back down behind her desk. "What are you recommending?" "Operation Quiet Storm," General Hayes said. "We show them that humanity can't be bullied or controlled. 3 phases: information warfare, targeted strikes, and psychological pressure. The goal isn't conquest," Admiral Brooks explained. "It's to make them understand that threatening humanity has consequences. We hurt their ability to coordinate and communicate. We demonstrate our capabilities. We make them afraid of what we might do next." Defense Secretary Watson looked at Jake. "What about the diplomatic angle?" "I'll continue to play my role," Jake said. "The frightened ambassador trying to find a peaceful solution. It will give us cover for the initial operations and make our capabilities more shocking when we reveal them." President Carter was quiet for a long moment. "How many people will die?" "That depends on how smart the Council is," General Hayes said. "Our first strikes will target military and communication facilities. We'll avoid civilian casualties as much as possible. The goal is to make them surrender, not to destroy their worlds." "But if they escalate?" the President asked. Admiral Brooks answered grimly. "Then we'll show them why humans survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and global wars. We'll show them what happens when you threaten a species that has been preparing for this fight since we first looked at the stars. Rodriguez touched his tablet again. We need to start evacuating the civilian colonies in the disputed systems. We can disguise it as routine supply runs and rotation of personnel. Already in motion, General Hayes said. The colonists think it's a precautionary measure while we negotiate. They don't know what's really coming. President Carter stood up again. How long do we have? The council thinks we're weak and scared, Jake said. They'll spend the next few weeks celebrating their victory and planning how to control us. That gives us time to position our forces and prepare for the first phase. And when we're ready, President Carter asked. Admiral Brooks smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then we teach the council why you should never mock a human in a suit. They think that suit makes Jake look primitive and harmless. They have no idea that the most dangerous humans are often the ones who look the most civilized. The meeting continued for another hour, working out details and timelines. When it was over, Jake gathered his files and prepared to leave. As he reached the door, President Carter called out to him. Jake, are you sure about this? Once we start down this path, there's no going back. Jake turned to face her. Madam President, the Council made their choice when they decided to treat humanity like animals. They could have had us as allies. Instead, they chose to make us enemies. Now they'll learn what that means. As Jake left the White House, he could see the lights of the capital city spreading out below. Somewhere up there, beyond the Earth's atmosphere, human ships were already moving into position. The Council had 30 days to enjoy their victory. After that, they would discover that the simple black suit had been hiding something far more dangerous than they could imagine. The quiet before the storm was ending. Soon the Council would learn that when you mock humanity, you do so at your own peril. 25 days had passed since the Council's ultimatum to humanity. In the crystal chambers floating in space, Chancellor Vextar stood before a gathering of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. His 3 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he looked around the room at his fellow council members. As you can see, Vextar announced, his voice echoing through the chamber, the human problem has been solved with remarkable ease. Our intelligence reports show that human ships are leaving the disputed systems. Their colonies are being evacuated. The primitive species has learned its place. The other council members made sounds of approval. Hive Speaker Zix clicked her mandibles in what passed for Cathara laughter. Perhaps we should have made more demands. If they surrender this easily, we could have taken their home system as, well, the ethereal representative, known only as Whisper, floated in its containment suit. The humans proved weaker than even our lowest estimates suggested. Their ambassador's calm behavior was clearly an act to hide his fear. Vextar raised a crystal goblet filled with Zephyrian wine. To the Council's wisdom and strength. May all species learn from humanity's example. The celebration was in full swing when the first alarm sounded. A low, urgent tone that made every being in the chamber freeze. Vextar's 3 eyes turned toward the communication console as a young Zephyrian technician ran into the room, his blue skin pale with terror. Chancellor, the technician gasped, we're receiving emergency signals from the Zephyrian homeworld. The orbital command station has gone dark. Vextar's middle eye narrowed. Gone dark? What do you mean? Before the technician could answer, another alarm joined the first, then another. Soon the chamber was filled with the sound of warnings from across council space. Representatives from different species began receiving urgent messages on their personal communicators. The Cathara industrial complex on Hive Moon 7 is not responding. Hive Speaker Zix announced, her voice losing its earlier confidence. Our gas mining operation in the ethereal nebula has been compromised. Whisper said, its voice becoming more like a wail than a whisper. Vextar moved to the main communication console and activated the long-range scanner. The display showed space around the Council's most important worlds. What he saw made his blood run cold. Ships were moving through Council space. But these weren't the clumsy human vessels they had expected. These ships moved like ghosts, appearing on sensors for brief moments before vanishing again. They were smaller than traditional warships, but they moved with a precision and speed that seemed impossible. How many human ships are there? Vexstar demanded. The technician worked frantically at his console. We don't know, Chancellor. They appear and disappear so quickly that we can't get an accurate count. Our sensors can barely track them. On the display, one of the ghost ships moved toward the Zephyrian homeworld's orbital defense platform. The platform was a massive structure, designed to stop entire fleets with its powerful energy shields and weapons. As they watched, the human ship fired a single weapon. The projectile that hit the platform wasn't made of energy like most alien weapons. It was a simple piece of metal, but it moved so fast that it punched through the energy shields as if they weren't there. The platform exploded in a spectacular display of light and debris. Impossible, Vexstar whispered. Our shields can stop any known weapon. Not kinetic weapons moving at those speeds, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. Everyone turned to see Ambassador Jake Morrison walking into the room, still wearing his simple black suit. But this time, he wasn't alone. 2 humans followed him into the chamber. General Patricia Hayes wore a military uniform that looked plain compared to the elaborate dress of the aliens. Admiral Kevin Brooks was also in uniform, his face showing the calm expression of a man who had seen many battles. How did you get in here? Vexstar demanded. This station is under maximum security. Jake smiled, but it wasn't the polite diplomatic smile he had worn before. The same way our ships got past your defenses, Chancellor. You assumed we were primitive, so you never bothered to really study our capabilities. On the display, more human ships appeared around different council worlds. The Cathara moon base was surrounded by vessels that seemed to materialize from empty space. The ethereal gas mining operation was being systematically dismantled by ships that moved too fast for the automated defenses to target. What do you want? Hive Speaker Zix asked, her mandibles clicking nervously. The same thing we wanted 25 days ago, General Hayes replied. To be left alone to manage our own affairs. The difference is that now we're not asking. Admiral. Brooks activated a small device that projected a holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed the human fleet in action around Council worlds. These are surgical strikes on military and communication targets. We're avoiding civilian casualties, but we're crippling your ability to coordinate a response. You're attacking Sovereign Council worlds, Vexstar said, his voice shaking with rage. This is an act of war. No, Jake said calmly. This is a response to your threats. You gave us 30 days to abandon our legally established colonies and submit to your control. We're simply demonstrating why that's not going to happen. The display showed a human ship approaching the Zephyrian homeworld. It wasn't attacking the planet itself, but targeting the orbital facilities that controlled space traffic and communication. The ship's weapons were precise, destroying only what they needed to destroy. How is this possible? Whisper asked, its voice now barely audible. Your species has only been in space for 50 years. Your species has been in space for thousands of years, Admiral Brooks replied. But you've been at peace for the last 200. You've forgotten what war really looks like. Jake walked to the center of the chamber, looking up at the council members on their platforms. You made the mistake of thinking that because we're younger, we're weaker. But humans have been fighting wars for our entire history. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and global conflicts. We've been preparing for interstellar war since the day we first saw your ships. On the display, the human fleet continued its systematic destruction of Council military assets. The ships moved with perfect coordination, hitting targets across multiple star systems simultaneously. It was clear that this wasn't a desperate attack by a cornered species, but a carefully planned military operation. The ships you're seeing represent only a small fraction of our fleet, General Hayes said. We have been building and preparing for decades, using technology we developed by studying your own vessels. Your shields are designed to stop energy. Weapons? Admiral Brooks explained. They're useless against kinetic projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. Your ships are built for show, not for real combat. Your tactics are based on intimidation rather than actual fighting. Vexstar stared at the display, watching as his civilization's military power was systematically dismantled. What do you want us to do? That depends on how intelligent you are, Jake said. You can continue to see humanity as a threat that needs to be controlled, in which case this demonstration will continue until you have no military capability left. Or you can accept that we are equals who deserve to be treated with respect. The chamber fell silent except for the continuing alarms. The council members looked at each other, seeing fear in eyes that had never known defeat. The species that had ruled the galaxy for centuries were discovering what it felt like to be helpless. The choice is yours, Jake said as he turned to leave, but I suggest you choose quickly. My people are very efficient at this sort of thing. As the three humans left the chamber, the council members stared at the display showing their burning worlds. The simple black suit that had been the subject of so much mockery had concealed something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The primitive species they had dismissed as harmless had just proven that appearances could be very deceiving. The celebration was over. The real education was just beginning. 3 hours after the human ships had vanished from council space, the chamber was in chaos. Emergency reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Orbital Command Station was gone, reduced to glowing debris that would burn in their atmosphere for weeks. The Kuthara Industrial Complex had been turned into twisted metal and broken machinery. The ethereal gas mining operation leaked precious resources into the void of space. Chancellor Vexstar stood before the main display, his three eyes struggling to process what he was seeing. The damage reports kept coming, each one worse than the last. Communication arrays destroyed, defense platforms obliterated, military bases reduced to smoking ruins. Yet somehow, not a single civilian had been killed. How is this possible? Vexstar asked for the 100th time. Our intelligence said humans barely had 20 warships. Where did this fleet come from? Hive Speaker Zix's mandibles clicked nervously as she consulted her datapad. Our spy networks report that human space appears normal. Their colonies are still being evacuated. Their merchant ships follow normal trade routes. It's as if these warships appeared from nowhere. Ships don't just appear from nowhere, said Commander Throck, the Borkan military advisor. His species was known for their strategic thinking, but even he looked confused. There must be hidden bases, secret construction facilities. No one can build a fleet this advanced without someone noticing. The chamber's main door opened and Jake Morrison walked in again. This time he came alone, still wearing his simple black suit. The council members turned to stare at him with a mixture of fear and anger. Several of them reached for weapons, but Jake simply stood there with his hands at his sides. I thought you might have questions, Jake said calmly. I came back to answer them. Vexstar's middle eye focused on the human diplomat. What do you want, Morrison? Haven't you done enough damage? I want to prevent more damage, Jake replied. But that depends on how quickly you understand what you're really dealing with. General Hayes and Admiral Brooks entered the chamber. Behind Jake, this time they brought a portable holographic projector. Hayes activated it, and the chamber filled with images that made several council members gasp in shock. The first image showed Jake's simple black suit, but this time it was displayed in cross-section. The fabric contained fiber optic threads that could transmit data. The jacket had microsensors that could detect energy signatures and record conversations. The tie contained a communication device that could contact human ships anywhere in the galaxy. You mocked my suit, Jake said, looking up at Vexstar. You called it primitive. But this primitive cloth contains technology that your species hasn't even theorized about yet. The next image showed the interior of the Endeavor. What looked like a simple diplomatic vessel was actually packed with advanced scanning equipment. Every surface Jake had touched, every conversation he had heard, every security system he had observed had been recorded and analyzed. Your arrogance made you careless, Admiral Brooks said. You let a human diplomat wander through your most secure facilities. You showed him your defenses, your technology, your weaknesses. You even bragged about your military capabilities. Hayes changed the display to show star charts. While you were laughing at humanity's primitive expansion, we were studying every aspect of your civilizations. Every trade mission was a scouting mission. Every cultural exchange was intelligence gathering. Every diplomatic meeting was a chance to learn your secrets. Impossible, Whisper said, its voice barely audible. We would have detected such activities. You detected what we wanted you to detect, Jake replied. You saw a young species eager to learn from their betters. You never considered that we might be learning how to defeat you. The display changed again, showing human military facilities that the Council had never known existed. Shipyards built inside asteroids. Training facilities hidden in the depths of gas giants. Research stations disguised as mining operations. We've been preparing for this war since the day we first made contact with alien life, General Hayes explained. Not because we wanted war, but because we knew it might be necessary. Human history is full of civilizations that conquered others through superior technology and organization. We recognize the pattern. Commander Throck leaned forward on his platform. How many ships do you really have? Enough, Admiral Brooks said simply. But that's not the important question. The important question is why you never saw them coming. The display showed the human ships that had attacked Council positions. But now it revealed their true nature. They weren't built for traditional space combat. They were designed for stealth, speed, and precision strikes. Their weapons weren't meant to destroy entire fleets in glorious battle. They were meant to cripple an enemy's ability to fight back. You build ships for show, Jake said. Massive vessels that look impressive and project power. We build ships for war, small, fast, deadly. You fight like you're performing for an audience. We fight like we're trying to survive. Vexstar's three eyes all focused on Jake. What are you saying? I'm saying that everything you think you know about humanity is wrong, Jake replied. We're not a young species stumbling around in space. We're a species that survived every extinction event our planet could throw at us. We've been at war for our entire history. We've been preparing for interstellar conflict since we first looked at the stars. The display changed to show something that made several Council members step back in fear. It was a map of Council space, but it showed things that should have been impossible to know. The location of every major military base, the patrol routes of every fleet, the communication frequencies of every species. You've been spying on us for decades, Hive Speaker Zix said, her voice shaking. Learning about you, Jake corrected. The same way you've been learning about us. The difference is that we were better at it. Admiral Brooks activated another section of the display. While you were dismissing humanity as primitive, we were reverse engineering your technology. We took your energy shields and found ways to penetrate them. We studied your ships and learned how to destroy them. We watched your tactics and developed counters for every strategy. But the most important thing we learned, General Hayes added, was that you haven't fought a real war in 2 centuries. You've forgotten what it means to face an enemy that fights to win instead of fighting for glory. The chamber fell silent as the Council members absorbed this information. The species that had ruled the galaxy for centuries were discovering that they had been living in a carefully constructed illusion. The humans they had dismissed as harmless had been watching them, learning from them, and preparing to defeat them. What happens now? Vexstar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake looked around the chamber at the alien faces staring down at him. That depends on you. The attacks you witnessed were just a demonstration. We targeted military and communication facilities to show you what we can do, but we have the capability to do much more. Are you threatening us? Commander Throck asked. I'm educating you, Jake replied. You made the mistake of thinking that because we look different, we think different. But humans understand power just as well as you do. The difference is that we're willing to use it. The display showed one final image. It was a broadcast transmission that was being sent to every civilian population in Council space. The message was simple. Your leaders underestimated us. Your safety depends on their wisdom now. Our message is reaching every world in your territory, Admiral Brooks said. Your people are learning that their supposedly invincible leaders just had their military forces crushed by a species they were told was primitive. This is psychological warfare, Whisper said, its voice now full of fear. This is education, Jake corrected. Your people deserve to know the truth about what their leaders have done. They deserve to know that their safety depends on making peace with humanity, not war. As the three humans prepared to leave the chamber, Jake turned back to face the council one final time. You have a choice to make. You can continue to see humanity as a threat that needs to be controlled, in which case this demonstration will continue until you have no power left. Or you can accept that we are equals who deserve to be treated with respect. The chamber door closed behind the humans, leaving the council members alone with their fear and their shattered assumptions. The simple black suit that had been the subject of so much mockery had concealed not just advanced technology, but the patient planning of a species that had been preparing for this moment for decades. The council was about to learn that when you mock humanity, you do so at your own peril. Chancellor Vexstar stood alone in his private chambers aboard the council station, staring out at the stars. 2 days had passed since the human demonstration, and his world was falling apart. Emergency reports continued to flood in from across council space. Civilian populations were demanding answers. Military commanders were asking for orders that he couldn't give. The door to his chamber opened, and Admiral Corax entered. The Zephyrian military leader was old, even by their standards, his blue skin marked with the scars of ancient battles. His 3 eyes were dark with anger. Chancellor, Corax said, the council fleet is assembled and ready. We have 200 ships from 8 different species. Surely that's enough to crush these upstart humans. The Vexstar turned from the window. The humans destroyed our orbital defenses without losing a single ship. What makes you think a larger fleet will fare better? Because this time we'll be ready for them, Corax replied. We know their tactics now. We know they use stealth and speed. Our ships will be prepared for their kinetic weapons. And if we lose, Corax's middle eye narrowed, then we'll die fighting instead of cowering in fear. The council has ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. We will not be brought low by a species that barely knows how to leave its homeworld. Vexstar was quiet for a long moment. He knew that attacking the humans was probably a mistake. But he also knew that his leadership depended on showing strength. The other council members were already questioning his decisions. If he did nothing, they would remove him from power. Very well, Vexstar said finally. Order the fleet to attack the human colonies in the disputed systems. Show them what happens when they challenge the council's authority. Admiral Corax bowed and left the chamber. Within hours, the largest military force in council history was moving toward human space. 200 ships from 8 different species, armed with the most advanced weapons their civilizations could create. It was a force that could conquer entire star systems, but as the fleet traveled through hyperspace toward the human colonies, they were being watched. Human intelligence had been monitoring council communications since the first attacks. Every order, every movement, every plan was known to Earth's military commanders. Admiral Kevin Brooks sat in the command center of the human battle station hidden in the asteroid field near the Kepler system. The facility looked like a simple mining operation from the outside, but it was actually one of humanity's most advanced military bases. Around him, displays showed the approaching council fleet. How long until they arrive? Asked Captain Ryan Foster, commander of the Human Defense Force. 18 hours, Brooks replied. Are our ships in position? All squadrons are ready, Foster confirmed. The trap is set. The council fleet emerged from hyperspace near the edge of the Kepler system, expecting to find defenseless human colonies. Instead, they found what looked like abandoned settlements and empty space stations. The human evacuation appeared to be complete. Where are they? Admiral Corax demanded from the bridge of his flagship. Intelligence reports said the humans were still evacuating their colonies. Detecting minimal life signs on the surface, reported his sensor officer. It appears the colonies are mostly empty. Korex studied the tactical display. The human settlements were spread across 3 planets and 2 moons. They looked vulnerable, undefended. Move the fleet into attack formation. We'll destroy these colonies and send a message to Earth. The Council fleet moved deeper into the system, approaching the apparently defenseless human settlements. The alien ships were magnificent, their hulls gleaming with energy shields and bristling with weapons. They moved in perfect formation, like a parade of power designed to intimidate any observer, but as they closed in on the first planet, the trap was sprung. The abandoned colonies suddenly came alive with weapon fire. The mining facilities revealed themselves to be heavily armed. Military bases. The empty space stations opened their docking bays to release swarms of human fighters. The asteroids in the system turned out to be camouflaged gun platforms. The Council fleet found itself surrounded by enemies that appeared from nowhere. The human forces were smaller than the alien ships, but they moved with deadly precision. While the Council ships tried to maintain their formation, the human fighters attacked like a school of fish swarming a predator. "Impossible!" Korex shouted, as his flagship shuddered under multiple impacts. Where did these ships come from? The answer came from every direction at once. Human vessels that had been hiding in the asteroid field, behind moons, even inside the gas clouds of the system's outer planets. They had been waiting for the Council fleet to commit to the attack before revealing themselves. The battle was swift and brutal. The Council's energy weapons, designed to fight other energy-based systems, proved ineffective against the human ship's advanced armor. The alien ship's shields, which had protected them for centuries, were useless against human kinetic weapons that punched through them like paper. One by one, the magnificent Council warships were reduced to burning wrecks. The Zephyrian flagship tried to retreat, but human fighters surrounded it like wolves bringing down a wounded animal. The Kithara battlecruiser exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire system. The ethereal command ship simply vanished, its energy containment systems failing catastrophically within 6 hours. The greatest military force in Council history was floating debris. Admiral Korex found himself on the bridge of his crippled flagship, watching human ships move through the wreckage of his fleet. His 3 eyes were dull with shock and defeat. When the human boarding party arrived, he surrendered without resistance. The news of the fleet's destruction reached the Council chambers within hours. The effect was immediate and devastating. The species that had relied on Council protection for centuries suddenly found themselves defenseless. Panic spread through their homeworlds as civilian populations realized their leaders had led them into a war they couldn't win. Within days, the Council began to collapse. The Ethereals were the first to break ranks, sending a secret message to Earth requesting a separate peace treaty. The Borkin followed, then the Altarians. One by one, the species that had mocked humanity began begging for mercy. Chancellor Vextar tried to maintain control, but his authority was gone. The other Council members blamed him for the disaster. Some called for his removal, others for his execution. The unity that had held the Council together for 1,000 years crumbled in a matter of weeks. 3 months after the battle, Jake Morrison returned to the Council chambers. The once proud facility was nearly empty now, with only a handful of species still maintaining their membership. The magnificent displays of power were gone, replaced by the humble requests for negotiation. Vextar was still there, but his silver robes were tattered and his 3 eyes were dim with defeat. He sat on a platform that was no longer the highest in the room, looking down at the human diplomat who had once been the subject of his mockery. "Ambassador Morrison," Vextar said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I believe we have matters to discuss." Jake looked up at the fallen Chancellor, still wearing his simple black suit. "Indeed we do, but this time the terms will be different." The negotiation was brief and one-sided. The disputed systems would remain under human control. All future human expansion would be decided by humanity alone. The Council would never again presume to threaten human interests or treat humanity as anything less than equals. As Jake prepared to leave the chamber, Vextar called out to him one final time. How did we not see this coming?" Jake paused at the door and turned back. Because you saw what you wanted to see. You saw a primitive species in simple clothes, and you assumed that made us weak. You never considered that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones who look most harmless. He gestured to his plain black suit. You mocked this suit, called it primitive. But it contained technology you couldn't imagine. More importantly, it contained something you never recognized, the patience and intelligence of a species that has survived every challenge the universe could throw at us. Jake walked toward the door, then stopped. The council ruled through fear and intimidation for 1,000 years. You forgot that someday you might meet someone who wasn't afraid. Today you learned what happens when you try to intimidate humanity. As Jake left the chamber, Vextar stared at the empty space where the human had stood. The simple black suit that had been the subject of so much mockery had concealed the instrument of the council's destruction. The primitive species they had, dismissed as harmless, had proven to be the most dangerous enemy they had ever faced. The galaxy had learned a new lesson. When you mock a human in a suit, you do so at your own peril. The flames that consumed the council's power were not just the fires of war, but the burning away of their arrogance and assumptions about humanity's place in the galaxy. The age of the council was over. The age of humanity had begun.